Good day, everyone. Today I'm talking to Anna Wright, who is the CEO and founder of BindiMaps. Good day, Anna. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Tony. Thank you very much for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you for finding time despite your busy schedule and for, giving me the opportunity to ask you some questions to hear about your story and your journey with BindiMaps.
Sure,
Can I move on to our first question?
absolutely.
Thank you. Anna, can you please share a little about yourself, the place you were born, your education, your passion, the things that you enjoy doing, and one thing that the public might not know about you?
Sure. Well, I was born in New Zealand. I had a very traditional and boring education right through to a PhD in finance. So my background is very much a fairly boring and staid finance accounting type background, along with quite a few years in an academic role. So that's really, so that doesn't sound anything like a startup founder, which I think is unreal. One thing that nobody really would know about me, when I was young, my father had a job that took us all around the world, and so sixth grade was here in Australia that went into my high school, but that was my 12th school. So 12th junior school across 5 different countries and 3 different languages. But I like to think that now built resilience and ability to change rapidly, which is not so much needed in the finance academic world, but is certainly needed in our glorious startup world.
Good on you, Anna. Thank you for sharing that. And I think people, when they travel to different parts of the world, visit different cultures or interact with different cultures, I personally feel that their cognitive diversity is widened. You know what I mean? Because they're exposed to different scenarios, different the way people solve problems in different cultures is quite different to probably what we do here in Australia. So that actually helps us to be more, I think, look at problems in different angles, and probably even solutions in different angles, and being aware that, this need not be done as per ABC. It could be A, C, D, or, E, F, G, you know what I mean? And I think it's very encouraging that you shared that. You had that experience when you were young.
Well, I do remember one of my probably favorite experiences when we're talking about experiencing different cultures was that I was in school in France when there were a lot of refugees in my school that were from Cambodia, Kampuchea at the time. And so to be in a classroom as a 7-year-old with other 7-year-old kids and hearing about their experiences being refugees certainly changed my perspective at 7. And then coming to Australia, completely different world. So you will hear me ranting occasionally about rights of refugees, and that's all from that experience.
Good on you, Anna. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And moving on to our next question, can you please share about your work experiences before you started your venture, which is BindiMaps, and what lessons have you brought forth from your previous work experiences into your business?
Sure thing. So I trained as a chartered accountant, and I spent a lot of years out in industry. And one of my favorite things to do was work with startups. Then I moved into an academic role where I was actually there doing valuations of unique and special assets. So again, a rather odd change into startup world. But where I've found that experience has been very helpful has been in talking to venture capitalists and investors and being able to cross over into their language and their world and understanding what they are after, and then coming back into my world and playing around with pricing models and things like that. So probably a very boring non-startup type education, but it actually has proved to be very helpful in startup world.
Good on you, Anna. Thank you for sharing that. To be honest with you, I think the venture capitalist world, it can be a pretty tough world to deal with. I had a few experiences of talking to them, and they just wants to know how much cash you got in the bank and what kind of traction you got. And it can be a bit daunting when you're starting off, you know what I mean?
Well, and it's a language. If you don't understand the language or the words that they're throwing around, and the last thing you want to be is to look non-confident, and because you're trying to sell them the business idea, and you don't want them to get hung up on worrying about whether you understand money or not. So, but look, I still find them challenging to deal with. Absolutely. But yeah, I certainly think that the finance and accounting background has helped me with all of that.
Good on you, Anna. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And moving on to our next question. Can you please tell me, when did you start BindiMaps, and what was the inspiration behind this entrepreneurial venture?
Well, BindiMaps itself started in the beginning of 2017, but it's actually an idea that has been percolating around in my brain for quite a long time. As well as when I was working in chartered accounting, I actually had an incident where my eyesight started failing, and I wrote it off to stress. But when I went to see some retinal specialists, they said that I had this very rare but degenerative retinal disease, and that I should get ready to go blind because I had it in one eye and I should have had it in both eyes. So that was fairly terrifying diagnosis. I was really lucky in that my eyesight does deteriorate, but it hasn't deteriorated as fast as they said that it would. And in that process, when you get a diagnosis like that, you go and talk with somebody like guide dogs, and they sort of start to walk you through your life as a person without vision. And the one thing that used to get to me was always, okay, so I can learn Braille, but how am I supposed to find a Braille sign? You know, am I seriously supposed to be in a train station trailing my fingers around these grotty walls trying to find the missing Braille sign? So my friends will tell you, for years I've always laughed at Braille and said, how on earth is somebody who's blind supposed to know that Braille sign is there? And the reality is that they don't know that it's there. So, and that was where that was a frustration. And so, because I was also working with startups, I was following tech, and it so happened that sort of around 2017, Beacons became good enough to do what we're doing now, which is to try and replicate GPS indoors. And that was where the idea for BindiMaps came from and started.
Good on you. And I mean, thank you for sharing that personal story. And it must have been really daunting to be given that information, that you could potentially lose your eyesight. But, it didn't stop you. You saw that pain point and you thought, okay, how could I actually, convert that pain point into a way of helping people who are probably in that similar situation. We are grateful that you didn't lose your sight, which is great, because you could work on this project and help a lot of people who might be in that situation. So good on you for being courageous and getting out there and getting it done, to help those who are struggling.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. And I will say that for the entire team, showing somebody who is blind or vision impaired BindiMaps for the very first time, it's such a joy, because we really do, we often get tears, we get laughter, we get so many extreme positive emotions, because for most of us who are sighted, we don't understand the lack of independence that people with vision impairment can experience out in our outdoor worlds or our public building worlds. And that's what Bindi is short for, is Be Independent. And it's such an honor to be able to give that back to people who have lost their sight, because just even little things like going to a bathroom, if you're blind or vision impaired, you don't know how the toilet flushes. And I know that's something that's a very mother thing of me to say, but to me, can you imagine sort of fiddling around in a public bathroom trying to find where the loo flushes? It's just, it's not dignified. It's not nice. So we can solve that, which is great.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for sharing that. And Anna, moving on to our next question. I believe you touched on the answer in your previous answers, but it would be good if you could elaborate a bit more. So could you please share about BindiMaps' unique product offerings, that which is a standout for your customers?
Sure. So BindiMaps is a smartphone application that lets anybody navigate an unfamiliar building like a hospital or a university. It's basically taking one of those touchscreen kiosks and putting it into your phone, into your pocket, so you can search for what you're looking for, a shop or a restroom or a restaurant. And then there is a map view there, and it will give you a little arrow telling you where you are and which way you're facing, and draw you a blue line to follow to your destination. So while anyone can use BindiMaps, we originally started it for people who are blind or vision impaired. And it was actually during some testing out at one of the Sydney universities, we were approached by some students asking, what have you got there? Well, I'm trying to find my exam room. Will this help me find my exam room? We're like, yeah, sure. Tell us what room number it is. We'll search it for you. And they're like, oh my goodness, how can we have this? I always have to joke to myself about the entitled sighted people. Like, at that stage, it was fairly rudimentary for a map view. But from that, we sort of zhuzhed up the map view, and anyone can use it now. So those are our users. The app's actually free for anybody to download and use. You don't need to sign on. You just do the normal accept of the conditions. Our customers are actually the building owners. So what we offer to building owners is to increase their customers' satisfaction. We know that in shopping centres, the two biggest complaints that shopping centres get is around wayfinding and around parking. We do actually have a partial solution for parking as well, because we have a thing called a Bindi link. So when you park your car, if the car park has been BindiMapped, you can leave a pin on your car so you won't lose your car. You can get taken straight back to your car when you finish shopping. So it's about customer engagement, about customer satisfaction for our building owners, and then through to equity and diversity and inclusion and all of those things. And then at the same time, we are also collecting a lot of anonymized data, so we don't know that it's you, but it does show heat maps of traffic flows, searches, those sorts of things. So there's actually quite a lot of benefit that BindiMaps offers to our customers, which is fantastic, because we want to get BindiMaps out there so we can serve all of our users, so that people with vision impairment and people without vision impairment can enjoy our public buildings.
Excellent, Anna. That's wonderful to hear. I love that term that you used, BindiMapped. And I hope more places would be BindiMapped.
I hope so too. Startup founders always have these massive visions, and I'm like, no, BindiMaps is going to be everywhere. At the moment, actually, I'm gunning to do Parliament House. Wow. We've just done the National Library of Australia, which is a huge one for us, well, for our vision impaired community, because the National Library of Australia collects rare brailled books. But at the moment, now they can, but if you were blind, you couldn't find the braille books. So it was, so now the National Library's been done. And as I was talking to the National Library, it was the National Library for all Australians, not just the National Library of sighted Australians. So now I thought, well, we'll just go a bit bigger and we'll do Parliament House, because really everyone should be able to access Parliament House. It shouldn't only be those that can see and get themselves around with the visual signage. So if any of your listeners want to help me with that, let me know.
Good on you, Anna. That sounds very exciting, and I wish you the very best with that project.
Thanks, Tony.
And I'm moving on to our next question. Could you please share about the highs in your business and for you before COVID-19?
Look, as I said before, the highs in our business are always about providing independence to people that haven't had it before. And that hasn't really stopped through COVID-19, where we have been able to install and do things. We've still been doing that. So other highs, I mean, we've raised money, we've got staff, we've got a whole lot of people that have come on board the whole freight train, which is always exciting as a founder. But it's still, you ask any one of us, it's going to be when you show somebody with vision impairment for the first time that they can get around on their own, do their own thing. In fact, we had a very funny tweet from the chair of Blind Citizens Australia where she had used the app at a shopping centre and she was saying, oh, damn it, no longer is blindness an excuse to not buy an anniversary present.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty good. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Mm.
Good on you, Anna. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now moving on to our next question. So when the pandemic hit Australia, what were the steps you took to mitigate its effect on BindiMaps?
Well, on one level, there wasn't very much we could do as a little tiny company. Of course, we had a lot of installations that had been booked, but we couldn't do anymore because we were in lockdown. Of course, all of the installations we're supposed to be doing down in Melbourne have been put on hold. Luckily for us, everything was put on hold rather than cancelled. So it's just over the time. So what we decided to do, rather than just sort of like go home and bemoan COVID, we actually went head down, tail up on product. And we've done a lot of development over the last few months. So we're about to do, our app originally was only for iOS devices. So they're the most popular for people with vision impairment. But in the next week or so, we'll be releasing our Android version. So we've built that. BindiMaps originally was only for inside of buildings, but we're in beta on incorporating outdoors as well. So you can effectively go from your bedroom to your university classroom, which is that's an enormous feature set build that the devs have been doing. So, yeah, so we sort of more just changed what we were doing and took the potentially slower time as a chance to work on other things that have been put off because we've been so busy doing installations.
Excellent. And that's very positive and encouraging. When I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs out there and businesses out there, that's just probably this, what they're all telling me, that they're actually, they're taking COVID situation as an opportunity to look inwards, and fine tune their products and services and offerings and build a cohesive team rather than focusing outward. So probably this is a great opportunity for us actually to, capitalize on as well. So thank you for sharing that.
That's okay. I always laugh that I think that, when crises like COVID come along, in startup land, we're so used to crises coming along that it's just like, oh, this is just the next one. It was, yeah, so I suppose we're used to moving fast and pivoting and going, right, we can't do that today. We have, I told you she would turn up. This is Lulu. She's going on the ground.
That was interesting. Thank you.
That's okay. Just one cat.
First time in an interview session for me. It happens on BBC
really?
and CNN and stuff, but not in my interview. But that's good. And I'm moving on to our next question. So moving forward, what are your plans for your business?
So moving forward, and again, all of this is COVID willing. We want to get back on track with the installations. So getting back, doing all the shopping centres we've got already booked, Parliament House, universities. Our plan is really for this year and the beginning of 2021 is to really get BindiMaps out and across all of Australia. Then again, COVID willing, sort of later 2021 calendar year, we'll be heading to English-speaking countries. And then after that, we'll move into some of the non-English-speaking countries. We can't do a straight Google Translate with BindiMaps. We need to check with advocacy groups. We work with Guide Dogs and Vision Australia and Royal Society for the Blind here in Australia. So we'll be looking for similar advocacy groups around the world, just to make sure that our language is appropriate in each of the different countries we go into. So exciting times.
I think very exciting. So you're actually taking BindiMaps global, an Australian startup going global. That's very exciting. Good
That's
on you,
it.
Anna.
Yeah, thank you.
And moving on to our next question, Anna, if you look back to the time from when BindiMaps commenced operations, what would you have done differently and why?
Oh, done differently. It's a really good and tricky question. I suppose my advice, what I would have done, so again, the universe helped me, let's just put it that way. But I will say that with capital raising, it's tough. You've got to get used to being said no to, and for sometimes really randomly weird questions, like they obviously haven't listened to you or read the pitch deck, but you just have to accept it. No is no, and that's fine. You just move on. But it does mean that cap raising can take a long time. So I think if I could go back and change things, I think each time I would have started to raise capital earlier. So we've done 2 cap rounds now, and each of them I probably left too late. So that's also note to self. When we're going into the next cap raise, start earlier than I think we need to when you've worked out your runway and your burn rates and things like that, because it's always way tougher than you think it's going to be.
Thank you, Anna, for sharing that. And Anna, moving on to our next question. What are the life and business lessons that you would like to share with someone who is planning to start a venture, a business, or a service in Australia?
I just think in general for life lessons, make sure you're doing something that you do believe in. I mean, so many people unfortunately go to work and look forward to the weekend. They're not passionate about what they're doing. And I just think that that level of or lack of passion shines through when you're trying to sell or do anything with customers. So do something that you love doing, that you feel like you're contributing to society, and always remember to learn and grow. I mean, I've found that the last few years, I think I've learned more in the last 3 years than I did in the 10 years before that. And it's wonderful going back into learning school again.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing that, your journey with BindiMaps. And I'm really encouraged because I think, what stands out with your business venture is you personally went through that experience of actually, having, that struggle with your eyesight and things of that sort. And then you were in that journey. And as you said, the universe intervened, or everything worked in your favor, and it did not eventuate. But you kind of visualized, I believe, what a blind person might be going through, and you took that pain point on board, and you found a solution for that through BindiMaps. So that's very positive and encouraging. And I think when people actually relate with pain points that others go through, they almost, I think, from my thinking, they are almost in the infinite gain. They're not thinking of making quick money by providing a solution, but thinking of actually improving on those solutions that you've built. Now you're thinking of going global, so basically trying to see this problem, find that solution for people in other countries as well. So it's very encouraging, and I thank you for also saying that always learn and grow. Take every opportunity to learn and grow through that process as well. So Anna, thank you so much for your time. I wish you the very best with BindiMaps and hope you guys do very well into the future, not only in Australia and the Parliament House for sure, but globally as well. So all the best, Anna. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Tony. It's been a pleasure.
All the best.